All right, I think we're all good. Let's start things off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming so much. Welcome to diversIT's virtual panel on diversity in tech. Thank you so much to those who submitted questions for our panel today. It's really good to see so many of you are curious about diversity and inclusion like we are. And if you'd like to refer back to this discussion afterwards, as I said, we'll be recording this and posting it on YouTube later for future reference. My name is Marcus. I'm the marketing lead here at diversIT.
My name is Simran. I'm an events officer at diversIT. We'll be the MCs for today, and we're excited to hear all your ideas. Although this event is being held virtually due to the current situation, in normal circumstances, we would be hosting this event on Clayton campus. So we would like to begin by acknowledging the people of Kulin Nations on whose land Monash University operates. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Attendees may be based elsewhere, so we pay our respects to traditional owners of the land from wherever you may be joining.
All right, and moving quickly onto our event structure, we will begin with our speaker introductions and then dive into the questions that you all submitted. From the submissions, we picked the ones that would best suit our panel discussion and provide you guys the most insight. And please feel free to ask any other questions you might have in the Zoom chat, and we'll get to them afterwards during the live Q&A section today. And don't forget to keep your mics off, everybody, while the panelists are discussing. Now, without further ado, we will go and introduce our panelists for tonight.
Firstly, we have Ayesha Ahmed. Ayesha studies computer science at the University of Melbourne and is an incoming software engineering intern at Google. Her love for science and maths started at a young age, but her parents encouraged her to read and learn about maths and science. To her, diversity is an indispensable element in capturing the full impact technology can have. It also paves a path for allowing everyone of all talents and backgrounds to contribute.
And next we have Mai Nguyen. Mai wanted to create her own solutions to everyday problems, and that is how her journey into IT started, with her learning to code all by herself since she was in grade 10. And she's now a consultant developer at ThoughtWorks. Mai believes that in the future, every job will require some level of coding, and she wants more and more girls and women to have the confidence and skill to jump in. To this end, Mai volunteers for Code Like a Girl, which is an initiative to inspire new generations of girls to learn to code and assume leadership roles in IT.
Next up, we have Dr. Misita Anwar. Dr. Anwar is currently working as a research fellow at the Department of Human-Centered Computing, Faculty of IT. Her research revolves around people and technology interplay and the impact that technology brings into people's lives. Diversity is an important part of her work, and she has been working with underprivileged rural communities, people with refugee backgrounds, those with disabilities, and those in developing countries.
And finally, we have Carsten Rudolph. Carsten is the head of Department of Software Systems and Cybersecurity and an associate professor at Monash. His research is in interdisciplinary cybersecurity, and some of his projects include the security of smart energy networks, digital health systems, and the human aspects of cybersecurity. With the Oceania Cybersecurity Center, he works with Pacific Island countries on reviewing their cybersecurity maturity. And throughout his career, Carsten has experienced a number of clear examples showing the different problems and issues that we face with diversity. Carsten believes that we need training to reduce our unconscious biases and better understand different perspectives. All right, now that we better know our panelists for tonight, let's start off with our first question. And this one's open to anyone. So the question is, do different fields of technology have unique challenges with respect to diversity? Now, this one's one that the committee came up with, and we're really interested to hear everyone's opinion. There's a huge range of fields of tech, and we want to hear your experiences. So what different fields of technology have unique challenges?
So from my experience, I feel like this conversation, can you hear me firstly? Sorry, I was lagging a bit.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. If at any point I'm lagging, please just let me know. So I feel like from my experience that the more general or the more well-known a particular field in technology is, the more normalized this conversation about diversity is. And as an example, let's take the general field of software engineering, where we have companies like big technology companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple and Facebook, who at least outwardly express their motivation in diversity. But I feel like the more specific it gets, it's harder to get people to care about this concept and why it's important, because the more specific a field is, the more niche it is. And I would say an example of this would be software engineering versus cybersecurity. I would actually put forth that the problem in diversity is a lot worse in cybersecurity than it is in software engineering in general. And I know that anecdotal evidence doesn't lead to, oh, this is like a statistically sound fact, but from my experience, I have never actually like straight up faced anybody, you know, ignoring me or talking over me or just flat out ignoring me until I went to a cybersecurity event in Melbourne where like literally everybody was a guy. And I'm not saying people are out there to ignore people, but sometimes this conversation, it's hard to seep in the more specific a field is. So that was my experience with it, but it might be different for other panelists.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really elaborate, eloquent answer. Thank you for sharing. What do the other panelists think?
I would say, you know, like it's hard to see like which different fields of technology, but yeah, I agree with Ayesha from her experience, because ultimately, if you think about it, it's, you know, the industry, it's the reflections of the society. So there are unconscious bias problems, but I think with the technology there are more to it, because there are existing assumptions that come with the use of technological tool or the design of technological tool. Something like we say, okay, coding or coding is suitable, like people assume that men are better at coding than women because, you know, the way they think are often more structured. So this assumption adds to that already existing issues and unconscious bias in the society, and that's reflected in the tech industry.
Yeah, I might add a little bit to the cybersecurity side, because that's my area. And what I find is that because in cybersecurity, in some areas, diversity is really bad. So we have really low numbers in women in the field. And there's different types of reactions to that. So one is to say, we take this as an excuse not to do anything because it's we can point to the numbers. And I can point to numbers like when I started studying computer science, we had in Germany, we had, I think, around 16, 17% women. And by now, that's about 25 years later, we are up to, I think, 19% in Germany. So it's really, really bad. And so we can take this as an excuse, or we can take it as a motivation and say, look, we need to change things. But it's a long-term thing, and it's difficult. And I think cybersecurity is probably one of the worst areas in terms of diversity, partly. But on the other hand, we have a very diverse spectrum of people doing excellent work in cybersecurity, but a lot of it is rather hidden and not really in the academic world.
Thank you all for sharing that. Moving on to our next question from Renee. Are there times where you felt you needed to pick your battles as an advocate? And if so, do you stand by that decision? Carsten, you've recently mentioned how you first-handedly experienced diversity issues. So we'd like to start off with you for this question.
Well, picking battles, it's probably always necessary to kind of pick battles. But in terms of diversity, I really never had that issue that I had to drop something where I thought, okay, I'll let that go. And the battles were really around changing the circumstances, and that is things like when I was back in Germany, I was leading the department. I had a PhD student, and she struggled with getting project work and her PhD, which was kind of a private thing, to really work. And there was a kind of a stipend where she would get like 1.5 days freed up per week to do her PhD work. We said, oh, that's great, let's apply for that. And then we looked at the application, and it required kind of an equal opportunity strategy for the institute. I said, okay, let's pick that out and send it in. I found out the institute didn't have one. So that's a moment where you could say, okay, too bad, we can't do it. But okay, I had to write one. So I wrote one, and I managed to push it through management and all that. And there's always battles that you need to take on. And I found very often it's quite a bit of effort, but then when you do it, you learn a lot, because suddenly I knew what you probably had to look out for. And I found that actually once we had it, and I actually put in quite a few challenging things into that strategy, then everybody liked it in the institute, and we had actually quite a few changes coming out of that. So I think it's really worth going through these battles sometimes.
I agree. It's important to sort of have strategies in mind to sort of push for these issues. Mai, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Okay, thanks, Carsten, for sharing the experience. I just remember that when I first started out, I started learning to code when I was in year 10. Yeah, so it was like 20-something years ago. And at that point in time, I was, my parents were against that. Because at that point in time, like 20 years ago, not many women, or especially Asian women or girls, to actually learn coding. It was something against the culture that, hey, girls shouldn't learn so much, and especially coding or machine, that is something that boys should be doing. However, against their will, I fight with my parents and show them that, hey, I love this, I want to try that, at least let me try that. So they gave me the chance, and I tried out. I went to Monash Uni, studying the Bachelor of Engineering. You know what happened? I was such a happy girl there, starting out my first day in uni, and went into the algorithm. My first lecture of algorithm. To my amazement, wow, the whole lecture room was full of people. I was overwhelmed. What I was overwhelmed by that time is I was the one out of the 5 women girls in the whole lecture room. At that point in time, I was shaking. I did not say anything bad about like hey, it was so bad to say, to experience those kind of things, but more like, that is the impact of the issue I had to experience at that time, being one of the only few girls within hundreds of students full of men. At that point in time, I felt really intimidated that, hey, it's okay. You might not have a lot of other women like you being in the same lecture theater. However, this is what you love doing. You love coding. Soldier on. Try to pick it up and try to learn and try to keep going and learn more about coding, and then you will be fine. Yeah, and then I just every day I just need to learn more and learn more by myself, and then just get used to being in a full lecture full of the other gender.
An amazing story. Thank you for sharing, Mai. Any other comments from our panelists?
Could I add something to that as well? Yeah. So Mai, yeah, I think your experience is the opposite of mine. What I'm trying to do as tech to influence my kids to go into tech, right? So I have 1 son and 2 daughters. I managed to influence the son to go into tech, although with a major in design. But no matter what I do with my daughter, she's 16 now, she's in high school. No matter what I do, they are, my daughter is not interested into tech. Yeah, so there is that, you know, but I think it's important to provide that opportunities, like to provide options and, hey, you can do this, you can do that, like early on, to give that space. for the opportunity. Yeah.
That is so true. Because like that is so true because like for me, it was just pure coincidence that I actually fell in love with coding when I was in year 10. Yeah. However, a lot of other like girls, they did not have that chance. And at least I think that it would be best if we can give them a chance, and it's their decision whether or not they will pursue that career in tech.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, you guys. I think we'll move on to the next question now. This one is a question from Candace. And Candace writes, what are your thoughts on diversity hires? Do you think that some companies purposefully hire talents of certain backgrounds, or do you think it's a hiring myth?
So in terms of diversity hires, this is like a pretty controversial topic that, if you want me to be fully honest, it's difficult to slice down and like answer, is this right or is this wrong? Because on one hand, like our panelists like mentioned beautifully, it's really difficult to be the only person of your type in a room. So having this sort of community, like for example, women-only community or LGBTQ only community is important, because it gives you a safe space and lets you know that there are people like you, and that you don't have to like actively fight for things. Whereas if you're the only person of your type in a room, you do have to actively tell yourself and put that extra energy into convincing yourself that you do belong there. In terms of diversity hires, however, though, I think that there's a structural difference between supporting people who are not traditionally supported versus creating a super frictionless funnel into getting like people of a certain type onto, you know, an internship, for example, let's say. And it's not that that funnel necessarily devalues this person's merit, but there is that element of making them think that, did I only get this because I'm a girl? And we only have these, or any other minority. Was I lagging? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna turn off my video because I was lagging for me. But as I was saying, so it's not that that funnel necessarily devalues people's merit, but it does in a way still add to imposter syndrome sometimes. And if our whole, you know, issue is to solve imposter syndrome, like, I don't know, I feel like in a way that this doesn't do it. Like there's a difference between a support network versus a full-on, fully-fledged internship program that only supports women or a certain minority. In terms of like whether it's actually working or not, I'd just like to pull out some stats on the Google internship. So the majority of interns in Google Sydney happen to be women. That's just a statistical fact. They don't actively say that they employ women only, but it is a true fact that they do. But if you actually look at the conversion rate of the people that convert to full-time, the majority of them happen to be men. So it's, even if our point is to try and get more women in, it's still not working. And I think like the whole point is to be able to not just create this outward expression of, oh, look, we hire women. You need to convince people to stay. And that retainment is the important part that diversity hires isn't solving. I feel like it just adds to the problem of making people stay, if that made sense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The retention rate is so important.
Cybersecurity, the thing is, if you don't put any effort in hiring with a diversity, you will not get a diverse team. And that's just it in cybersecurity, because it's also very competitive and you want to hire good people. And you really need to reach out to the people you want to get interested in the positions, etc. So you need to be really, really active if you want to have a diverse team, and then you need to look out for it. So it's probably not a pure diversity hire, but it's really putting effort in to get people interested, have them invited, show them that you have a team that is that really works for everybody in the team, and that is inclusive, and so that effort is really necessary. And I totally agree that if we don't then create the pathway to actually follow up with a career, through make it really clear that career breaks are possible, make it really clear that different types of flexible work are possible, etc., that different situations are supported, then all that hiring doesn't really help in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that's a really good point he made.
Yeah, I agree with both Ayesha and Carsten. Yeah, so first there is that focus on, there is lack of diversity in tech conference, calling for more diversity hire. Then when you start hiring heads with diversity, I mean, even like, I think it helps diversity hiring. It helps with the diversity issue in the organization. But I think it's more important, as both Ayesha and Carsten mentioned, is what organization do after the hiring. So, like implementing one-off unconscious bias training will not make much difference. Yeah, and it's also important to provide space for the diversity hire to be able to express their identity in the community, in the organization's community.
Yep. Thank you all. I agree it's important to hire and make constant efforts to retain a diverse workforce. So now moving on to our next question, which was quite common in the questions that we received from all our attendees, which is, what has your workplace done in order to encourage a diverse environment? So we'd like to start off with you, Misita.
Yeah. Sorry. Am I breaking up?
There's a bit of feedback on your end.
What about now? Is it better?
Yeah, that's better.
It's better now.
Yeah. So and I think Carsten can add to if to this answer later on if I miss anything. So Monash, for example, they operate at an international scale. So I think that in itself already brought about diversity in the organizations. Monash University also have a program called, like, I don't know if you've heard about Athena's One. Monash is part of Athena's One movement to encourage more women in the workplace and organizations. But I mean, there are things that like at the faculty and department levels that where this diverse environment is encouraged. And again, I would stress the fact that like for people to express their identity and not hesitate about put forward their values in the organizations, because organizations and their workplace can do things to promote diversity. For example, setting diversity goals or giving differential bonus for employee referrals of diverse talent. But I think it is the individual and groups to get organized that need to break out this norm. Yeah. So I myself came from a society where the power relations are clearly demarcated, between old and young, those with status and positions and those without. But so what I'm trying to do is to have, what I'm trying to say is that, like Monash University, for example, or other workplace should provide space for that personal development. And for organization to provide the space for this is very important.
That is absolutely true. It's very important to sort of take a step forward from your side as well to promote diversity and your values. Mai, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to add a few things that we do at ThoughtWorks here to promote more diversity with ThoughtWorks, within ThoughtWorks. So we have three main things that we do to help and support like more diversity initiative. And the first one of those three, the first thing is we try to support women to have flexible working arrangement. And that is the first thing that we do. Is like, hey, if you're a mom, if you're a mother, and if there's any other working hours that is more suitable for you to do that, let's have a talk, let's have a chat, and then we can work it out. And that's the first thing. And the second thing that we do is like we have mentorship and leadership training for women as well, not just simply like female ThoughtWorks employees, but we have that for all employees. However, another thing that we have is that like we have actual women in leadership position within ThoughtWorks that are voluntarily, actively participate in those mentorship programs to help those female engineers within ThoughtWorks to learn more, to get more training, and to be more comfortable in themselves, to go out and speak at conferences. And to upskill themselves as well. What we have is usually we have the kind of supporting you to write a submission for a talk. We have those people in the network of women to help each other, like, hey, if there's anything that you want to submit for a talk, come here and we will help you to do that. And then if you need to practice for your talk, we will help you being the guinea pig for your talk. So it's all about women helping women within ThoughtWorks to help us upskill. That's the second thing. And another thing is, which is I think I found very, very interesting. And that is the first thing I saw in ThoughtWorks. Pay negotiation. So at ThoughtWorks, we have the culture of every half a year, we have a pay review process. Yep, so every half a year, you will have a chance to review your pay with the leadership team. Yeah. And in that pay review, it's not your usual performance review, because usually you will see performance review. Yeah. But this is clearly say pay review. Yeah. And in that pay review, what we have is that like we encourage women to actually show off what they have done, what they have achieved for the organization. And in that, we have something like, how much do you want? How much do you think you are worth? Yeah. And then show us what you have done for that worth. And all the women going through the process and showcase what they have done, what they have achieved. And then after the pay review process, we will tell you that, hey, based on what you have told us, this is what you want. And based on your achievement, this is what we can give you. So it's more about encouraging more women to actually actively negotiate without feeling bad. The first time I did the negotiation, I felt so bad. I said to myself that I never show off my achievement before. But this one here, I have listed out all the achievements I have done. I feel proud of myself and I'm worth that much. So I think those three things are very important to actually to encourage more diversity within the company, and also to increase inclusion and retention of those female engineers as well within ThoughtWorks.
That's a really great answer. Thank you, Mai. The pay question is a depressingly common issue for the tech field, and it's great to see a really refreshing new approach being taken to that. We're going to move on to our next question now, and this one is from the committee, but we think it's an issue that is affecting a lot of diverse people in the tech field. We've noticed that it's a common experience for people entering the tech field to question their own abilities, especially if they come from a diverse background. A couple of you mentioned this earlier, and that can be an academic background or ethnic background or gender or anything that's really different from their peers. And that doubt can often be quite crippling, especially when it manifests in the form of imposter syndrome. Have you guys experienced imposter syndrome before, and what are your tips for overcoming it? Ayesha, I think you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. Do you want to take a go at this one?
Yeah, definitely. So this is something that I've talked about so many times with different people. In fact, I was just talking about it to Jocelyn just yesterday. Shout out Jocelyn. So the thing about imposter syndrome is that when we create initiatives that target imposter syndrome, specifically in women or in minorities, it comes from a good place, but there's this underlying assumption that often portrays itself in the way that, oh, you're a woman, you must be struggling, you must be having issues. And I want to connect this to my personal story. So I grew up in Dubai in the Middle East, and my experience was a bit different from Australia versus the United Arab Emirates. In the United Arab Emirates, my teachers in computer science and physics and math were all women. And that really made it seem like, to me, I never really doubted my place in technology. I never ever had an issue as a teenager with my confidence, and I never ever said to myself, I don't see anybody like me. The problem that was in the Middle East, however, was that there was a structural problem against women, and that structural problem portrayed itself in the way people thought about women. And as an example, there was this underlying belief that, yeah, women can do computer science, women can do tech. I think that there's a pretty good ratio of women doing like STEM fields in the Middle East. But structurally, women drop off after their graduation, after uni, to get married off to a man. And basically, it was a very strange dichotomy, because when it came to Australia, I didn't see any women at all. And there's this like difference of struggles where people would assume that confidence was the problem, but in fact, it's not necessarily confidence that is the issue, but how comfortable people are with expressing themselves. And we see all these initiatives about, oh, you're remarkable, you're an amazing woman, here's like this community to keep you safe. But the thing is, we don't need to be kept safe. We don't need to be told that we're confident. We already know that. Our problem is the fact that we're, when we actually speak out about the things that we care about and the things that we see as problems, we're told to shut down, we're told to be quiet. And that's the problem. Our confidence isn't the problem. And it gets really annoying when, even when you go to like women in tech conferences and all they talk about is confidence is the issue. You are remarkable. Like, I already know that I'm remarkable. I need to be given equal rights to certain things. It's the structural issue of women being seen as lesser that is the problem. Women's confidence is not the problem. Women are not the problem, is basically what I'm trying to say. So in terms of imposter syndrome, I just think it's targeted from a wrong angle. And, well, not necessarily wrong angle, but from a tilted angle, basically. Of course it's a problem. Like, confidence is definitely a problem. But the root of it, I feel like, is not targeted properly. And there's this constant theme of putting unfair burden on women and saying, you're not confident enough, you don't speak out enough, but that's not the problem. I hope that made sense.
I really love what you said, Ayesha. Well done. And I have to say that I totally agree, because for me, I never felt imposter syndrome before. Not because I'm saying that I'm overconfident with myself, but more like I am proud of who I am, and I absolutely have flaws just like anyone in the world. But I'm admitting myself, my flaws, and I still love it, and I'm happy with who I am. And where I am at the moment, I deserve it 100% because I have done it. I have achieved it. I have worked my best to achieve all of the little things that I have at the moment. So I am totally deserve where I am. So if anyone tell you that, hey, I don't think you should be in that place, did you use any kind of like backdoor to get into where you are? Just be proud of yourself and say that, hey, I have worked very hard to achieve, to get where I am today. You have to be proud of yourself, and you have to trust in yourself that you have done it. Because if you don't trust yourself, if you don't believe yourself, no one can believe in you. You have to trust yourself and trust in who you really are. Just embrace that.
Yeah, exactly. Totally agree, May. But I think what Ayesha mentions about that structural problem, there should be a way to go around it. You know, like, I experienced this firsthand. I was visiting university in Indonesia, my country. I was representing Monash University. And I came with colleagues, all white, and then when these people came to greet us, everyone was given name card except me. You know, so that, and then they didn't realize like I was the one who will be speaking on behalf of Monash University. Yeah, so you know, like these basic assumptions that she's yeah, you know, she's Malay, like us. There is no way she could speak instead of these white people. You know, like, so it's yeah, it's that underlying structural issues with assumptions of race and capability. I think it needs to be addressed.
I totally agree with all of you. Thank you for sharing that. I agree it's important to tackle the structural issues as well as being confident in yourself and just giving it a go anyways, regardless of how out of place you might feel. So moving on to our next question, which is something that was actually raised by several of our audience members. How can someone at college level do their part to improve diversity and inclusion around them? So in studies and in the industry. Carsten, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, that's a really challenging, difficult one, because there's so many different situations you can be in, and I guess the first thing is probably that we should not just kind of let situations go on without doing anything. Like if you realize there's a situation where, for example, somebody cannot really say what they think or gets talked over, or there's language being used that people are kind of minimized, or there's lots of different things that can happen. So the first thing is probably to speak up whenever there's a situation where you find that shouldn't be like this. And I find that well, I'm probably in the faculty of IT with the people around me. We're probably a little bit of in a bubble that we have a really good way to communicate usually, I think. But if I look a bit broader, there's many examples where people will need to speak up and interfere and say, okay, this is not how we are supposed to do this. And we often have realized if you do speak up, that people then, well, most of the people realize that it was a wrong way to do it, and they probably over time change their behavior. There are a few people who don't, because they really believe that that, for example, women are less able to do things, and then you need to probably escalate it. But in most of the cases, it actually works. And the second thing is probably don't lose confidence. I think everybody, probably a bit taking from the last discussion, everybody has imposter syndrome here and there, and it's really about being confident and make sure that you get the place that you deserve in that game, and then don't step back. Don't assume just because somebody communicates in a really weird way or bad way or aggressive way that you need to step back and really talk to people and reach out to people if something is going in a wrong way, because usually there is support. There's there's ways to change things. Looking at our faculty, we have a new position since last year, I think, an associate dean for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So there's structures being put in place where you could actually work with the people, reach out and change things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carsten. That's a really great answer. Unfortunately, we would love to hear more from our panelists on that one, but we'll have to move it on to the live Q&A section now. So this is everyone in the audience. This is your chance to ask any questions you might have relating to the many wonderful issues that our panelists have brought up so far. So we'll be reading questions for you from the chat. So if you'd like to put your questions in the Zoom chat now, or if you prefer to say it out loud, please do a little thumbs up reaction. I'm going to do one now just to show you guys. And we will hand the mic over to you to say what's on your mind. All right, we've got one from Joanna firstly. And Joanna asks, how do you go about improving diversity in leadership in technology? I believe this is an issue that a couple of you mentioned earlier, how seems to be a cutoff, especially when it comes to leadership. So what do you guys think about that?
I might take the try for this. This question is not easy, and because why it's not easy is because it's actually still an issue currently, why a very common issue within the tech industry. Yeah, and I just use an example within ThoughtWorks of how we try to improve diversity in leadership within ThoughtWorks. How do we do that? As I mentioned earlier, is that like at ThoughtWorks, we have regular training and leadership, just knowledge training and also leadership training for other female engineers within ThoughtWorks. And I think one of the things is that like that is the one thing we give more women leadership training so that they know what to expect and all those things. But I think that the main thing, the most important factor in which we can have more women in tech is that the role model. Yeah, the women we cannot be what we cannot say. So if we can see more women in leadership positions, then we will more likely to say, hey, there's another person. There's another inspiring figure, leadership woman there. She can be like that. I can be like that too. So that is the thing. So how do we have more role models in leadership positions? We need to have more women who dare to share their stories, who dare to share the experience to other women who are in other positions. So, so I think that in order to have more leadership in technology, we should first have more leadership training, and secondly, we need to have more women in leadership position to share the inspiration and share the motivation, being where they are at the moment, and mentor other women.
Yeah, and I would like also to add to Mai's. And yes, you need as May mentioned, the leadership and the role model, but you also need to, I would say, to provide a space where women can be supported in getting this leadership position. Yeah, so for example, like a couple of colleagues and I were developing this women in academia, especially in STEM related subjects, to address this issue with the lack of women leadership in tech. So what we're trying to do is to provide space for these women to get together, to have these conversations amongst them, and to strategize ways to address these issues. And within that program, we'll provide mentoring for junior members. We'll also provide leadership training, as May mentioned. So, and a space for this network to build and to grow. You know, so something like a virtual platform where they can interact and strategize for solutions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mai and Misita. It's great. Oh.
Can I add a very brief one on that?
Yeah.
My experience is that some women in leadership roles told me that they had to choose between family and the leadership role. And I think we need to make very, very clear that there is the possibility also for women to take leadership roles without having to take that choice, which for men apparently seems to be totally normal.
Thank you all for that. I definitely agree with supporting more women, and it's great to hear about the initiatives, Misita, that you're working on. Moving on to our next question, it is, there has been a lot of discussion about representation of women in tech. How can we address other areas focused on areas such as POC and LGBTQ plus diversity in the tech industry?
I might start, and yeah. So I think yeah, that's a very good question. I think the color of our skin, the gender, disability, social interaction, orientations, all interact, right, to affect our life experience. And yeah, it's true. It contributes to unequal outcomes. That in a way you can't even attribute it to one dimensions, right? So what I'm thinking is one way we can do is to present ourselves, present our identity, you know? So like if everyone's doing this, presenting their identity rather than looking at differences, and when people started doing present themselves, you'll see more and more of this color. And at the end of the day, all you see is the range of colors, and it's difficult to categorize, put people in boxes. So yeah, so that's what I think can be done. And when this is done enough by individuals and advocate enough by groups, you can do what you might call it. I read this somewhere. Micro affirmations. These are small, inclusive behavior that they can offer encouragement and validation to others. So I think presenting yourself, your value, your identity, and more people and group advocating for this is very important.
Maybe quickly adding to that, I think this is one area where training is really important, because as a middle-aged white man, I'm not a particularly good representative of diversity in tech, I guess, and also I don't necessarily fully understand the struggles people have that come in a white male-dominated environment. So I really need to learn what the issues are so that I can look out for it and therefore I think things like the Ally network at Monash and other trainings that are there are very, very valuable, and I really can only encourage people to do it and really develop a better understanding how we can build better and more inclusive environments to work in.
Really good answer, Carsten. I love the reflectiveness that you gave in that. We'll move on to our next question quickly. This one is, women often get asked to talk about diversity rather than their own technical abilities or specializations. How do you strike a balance between being an advocate for yourself and getting work done?
I might start off with this. So connecting to my personal story, it was difficult to sort of connect with the diversity movement in Australia, because it felt like the struggles that were focused here and the struggles that were focused in the UAE were sort of different. Not necessarily completely different, but they were different. So for some context, I got into an Ivy League university when I was 16 on a full ride with a 2400 SAT score and 99.0 ATAR. And the reason I wasn't allowed to go was because my parents thought that Muslim women shouldn't travel on their own. Muslim women shouldn't go out of their way to pursue an education. And the only choice that I had left was to come to Australia to study at Melbourne University because my family was here. So In terms of being an advocate for diversity, it was really difficult to find somebody with similar struggles, someone who had to fight for education as much as I felt like I had to. And this actually connects to the imposter syndrome question, because I never felt like I lacked my merit, but rather I felt like things were just structurally taken away from me. And in terms of talking about diversity, I didn't feel like I could connect to anybody when I first moved here. The only thing that I could do was talk about what I was capable of, and that obviously overlapped with like my technical abilities and public speaking and stuff like that. And I just want to say that there is an unfair burden on women and minorities to advocate for people of their type. To everybody here, it's not your burden. It's not your burden to go out of your way to fight for other people. Of course, you can, and it's great if you do, but don't undervalue yourself and think it's my responsibility to carry this whole burden on myself and solve this problem. It's really not. Just going out of your way and doing things, and even if it's like getting an internship, speaking in a public speaking event, getting a scholarship, just by doing these things, you are actually advocating for diversity, because you're becoming somebody that people can look up to. And I actually didn't get into diversity until this year, when I started realizing like, oh, these are the different problems that I can help with. But one of the most common things that I get on LinkedIn, for example, is people reaching out to me and saying, hey, I love all the work that you've been doing and I appreciate you. And I'm glad that I can see somebody like you who's like me. And now I believe I can do those things. And I never actually actively said like, hey, I'm a woman. But just by doing things, you are advocating for diversity. So it's not your burden, is how I'd like to conclude.
Thank you, Carsten and Ayesha, for that. We'd like to keep this discussion going, but keeping the time in mind, we'll have to end the Q&A here. And now to the moment that you've been waiting for. Our lucky winner who has won a catch-up session with Mai is Belinda Chan. Congratulations, Belinda, and we'll reach out to you soon with more details. This brings us... Congratulations. And I'd also like to thank our speakers for taking the time to share their ideas on how we can embrace diversity in the tech field. I think we're all a little bit more enlightened and aware now.
Yes, thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you, our attendees, our lovely audience, for engaging with us today and submitting your questions. We really hope you found this session insightful, and we'd love to know your thoughts on this event. Lingli, if you just want to bring up that slide. If you'd like to see more of this type of event, what did you think? Share your thoughts with us. The QR code on the screen on the right there is our feedback form for this event. Please scan it so you can tell us what you think. And as we said earlier, if you'd like to refer back to our discussions today, a YouTube link to the recording will be up very soon. If that's all for tonight, I think we can wrap it up there. This is formally the end of our Diversity in Tech panel. Thank you so much again for coming, and enjoy your mid-semester break.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.